Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of My Element on RMU Radio, that movie show that talks about not only movies and movie reviews, but also movie information, movie topics, movie news, stuff about movies you would actually, hopefully, care about. Today, I have a pretty exciting show, I like to think, planned for everyone. I have 3 topics instead of 2, so moving up in the world. For those of you wondering, yes, the show is a little bit later than usual today. I had some problems figuring some stuff out in here, and so I pushed the show back a half hour because I figured that would be easy. But to make up for that, I added a new topic to talk about, which I think is pretty nice on my part, if I do say so. So what am I going to be talking about today? I've teased it enough. Auteur Theory is going to be first up on my to-do list, followed by why movies suck this time of year and when are they going to get better. And then I want to talk about Fast 7 potentially winning an Oscar someday. And I want to talk about that. I know that news is like a week old, but I didn't have a show last week, and I feel like I need to talk about it because it's pretty big movie news, actually. So to start out, I'm going to get right into my first topic. I'll be talking about Auteur Theory. Now, what is Auteur Theory? I'm willing to bet you've never heard of that. Auteur Theory is going to be a great thing that you can throw in the faces of your friends to prove to them that you know more about movies. If you're listening to this radio show, I assume you have some sort of love of movies or some sort of enjoyment of movies. And this, I think, will help you appreciate movies even more so. So, Auteur Theory. What is Auteur Theory, also known as auteurism? The specific definition is a filmmaker whose individual style and complete control over all elements of production give a film its personal and unique stamp. Now, that's the dictionary definition of auteurism. What does it actually mean? Now, the auteur of a movie is the director of the movie, and auteur is French for author. So in Auteur Theory, a theory used mainly by film critics, film historians as well, but film critics are the ones who really put it into action the most. Auteur Theory is the way in which you classify a director who has a complete body of work with a lot of the same style and repetition in that style, and they take a real leading role in every step of the filmmaking process. So that would be the writing, the actual production, the filming, and then the editing. So the director needs to have a part in everything, and it's important to know that not every director is an auteur. Auteur is kind of like a title reserved for some of the best directors. Now, the main part of auteurism is style. So I think it's important that you understand what style is in film before we talk about auteurism. So a style in the film is just the way the filmmaker uses techniques, the director uses techniques to give specific changes or sort of values to the work he's doing. And different filmmakers naturally have very different styles. So some of the ones that are most famous, I would say, so Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese uses a lot of slow motion in his films. He likes to take running action, normal, like looking action, and then slow it down and then, speed it back up to normal speed. He uses lots of long tracking shots. The Copacabana scene in Goodfellas is probably my favorite tracking shot in any movie ever. Goodfellas is an amazing movie to begin with, but that tracking shot in the Copacabana scene, if you watch it, is just fantastic. They get out of the car, they walk through the streets into the Copacabana, through the kitchen, out to the end, and there's so many people, and it's so technically advanced, and it's a great tracking shot. I won't talk about that too much longer. And then the next thing is his use of popular music. For example, Wolf of Wall Street is actually a really great example of this. He uses a wide range of very popular music and different styles to really illustrate his point of, the wealth in Wolf of Wall Street. Another director with an incredibly recognizable style is Tim Burton. He has, of course, those Gothic color palettes, the real dark blues and purples, and the heavy use of black in his films, and his expressionist filmmaking design. He started off, of course, as an animator. And even in his live action films, you really get a heavy sense of kind of animation surrealism in it, because Edward Scissorhand is a great example of this real Gothic, real dark tone to Edward Scissorhands himself, and then also the neighborhood they even live in. It just has a real animated feel to it. And in Alice in Wonderland, the eyes are blown up. That's really a Tim Burton style. And then Quentin Tarantino is another great one. Hyper stylized violence. If you've seen a Quentin Tarantino movie, you know what I'm talking about. That really thick, dark red blood that just splatters everywhere. People have you seen Django Unchained? If you have, you will just know that people bleed way longer, way more blood than they ever should. But that's his style. He has those strong female leads and things like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, just very strong female leads. And trunk shots are his big gimmick. Usually, they're fun to pick out in his films. Pulp Fiction has a great trunk shot in it. So that's kind of like what style is. So now that you understand style, it's those elements that a filmmaker personally brings to his films that come through in every aspect of the film that make auteurism. So as I said, auteurism is kind of that, style of complete control over a film that has a unique personal touch to it from the director. So, throughout all the processes of filmmaking, the director has to have a say. And some of the best directors at auteurism, as I mentioned, not all directors are auteurs, but the best ones, the most famous auteurs are like Akira Kurosawa, Jean Renoir, Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks has that amazing pre-feminist construct in a lot of his movies that have that femme fatale that is so much smarter than you would expect, and who always seemingly knows what's going on in the room, and is sometimes even has better control of herself than the men in the movies. That is really a point he drives in his film. It's really part of his auteur. And then the greatest auteur of all times, hands down, is not ironically, it makes sense, the same guy I listed as my best director of all time, Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock is the ultimate auteur, if you really think about it. In every step of his writing, he uses something psychological. And in every step of his filmmaking, his production, his actual filming of the movie, he uses cinematic techniques that really exemplify a use of camera viewpoints. And then in the editing, he uses very elaborate editing, very deliberate editing with cuts that are different to create suspense usually, because as you know, Alfred Hitchcock really works in the thriller genre. So he really uses those elements to kind of push his message that couldn't just be done with just what you could see on the film. And a great example of this would be that shower scene in Psycho. Now, famously while filming that was a very psychological and emotional time for the actors and for Alfred Hitchcock, the director. But it's really the editing that makes that amazing. And I was just watching that scene again yesterday. And, I noticed every time I watch it, I noticed something a little bit different, but some of the cuts he uses, you say, that's not exactly a complete cut, but it's jarring. It changes just enough that it's jarring, and it puts you in this place of uncomfortableness. It's not a flowy scene, and, when they come in and the stabbing starts happening, it's so many different angles and so many strange cuts that it really helps put you on edge. And of course, the soundtrack helps build suspense. And Alfred Hitchcock had a huge, huge role in doing that. So if you're going to look at auteurs, you say that Alfred Hitchcock is the best auteur of all time. Quentin Tarantino is argued to be the most well-rounded auteur of the modern era. And See, isn't auteurism fun? I think auteurism is a very exciting thing. So there you have auteurism. If you ever want to, sound like you know way more about movies than your friends, just pull out auteurism. I guarantee they have no idea what that is. And just a side thought there, if you ever want somebody to tell you that you don't know anything about movies, just say you're a movie critic, because I guarantee they're going to tell you that they know way more about movies than you. And at that point, you throw auteurism in their face, which is a theory that usually just critics or historians use. You'll sound way smarter. It's like mise-en-scène. Maybe I'll talk about mise-en-scène someday and give you even more ammo for that. Now, that was auteurism. For those of you who don't know, maybe a heavy topic. I don't know. It excites me, so I wanted to talk about it. Coming up next, I have two topics that are probably going to be a little more enjoyable to those of you out there who want to know a little bit more about movies and less about movie theory. So I'm going to be talking about why movies suck. Because the past few months, movies that have been coming out really have sucked. I'm going to talk about why, what that's called, what the technicalities of it. And then I'm also going to be talking about why Fast 7, I keep calling it the Fast and Furious 7, but it's not. It's called Fast 7. Why Fast 7 is not going to win an Oscar, and why I can guarantee that. And that will be coming up after the break, after this quick commercial break. So I'll see you all in just 2 minutes. And welcome back to Out of My Element on RMU Radio. Something I failed to mention in the first block, I am live streaming this radio show, as I have been doing all my radio shows lately. I'm live streaming this. So in case you don't want to just listen to me, you can also watch and listen to me. And it's also a really great, easy way to watch back any episodes that you may have missed, or if you need to go back and listen to something that I talked about. It's an amazing way to do that. So that's there for you. That's a resource there for you. Now, in this second part of the show, I told you I was going to talk about why movies around this time of year, more recently the past few months, suck so much. And there's no other way to put it. They suck. And the reason they suck is it's not just me saying that. It's not just you saying that. It's not just people thinking that. There's actually a name for the past few months we just experienced. They're called the dump months in cinema. Now, usually the dump months, there are 4 dump months. Technically, there are 4 dump months throughout the year. And those are usually January, February, and then later in the year, August and September. This year, however, I will go on record saying that the dump months were not contained to January and February, but they also extended into March. Um, you know, I am a film critic, so every 2 weeks I get an email, and it's a list of movies that are going to be coming out. And over the past few months, there have just been no movies that are interesting and entertaining. And it's been a rough few months, and I've said that over and over again. With when I end a show, I always do that box office recap, what movies you should be seeing. And they've been really disappointing the last few months. So I decided I wanted to talk about why that is. The technical reason for dump months are you have reached the end of the biggest years in the movies. So November and December are huge months for movies because this is normally when all of your Oscar contenders come out. Now, October, we have seen some growth in that with movies like, Birdman and Gravity coming out in October. So October is starting to get a little bit of an edge on that. But November, December, especially December, is the bulk when the theaters are really throwing movies out there. So come January and February, which is award season, production companies are way more focused on those movies that already came out and winning awards than they are on releasing new movies. And by that time, actually, a lot of people have taken kind of the movies they had to see or wanted to see in November and December, have taken an economic toll on them. So people are less willing to go spend money come January and February. And then similarly, August and September are kind of drain months because you have June and July beforehand, which is box office season, the huge movie releases that come out, the ones that make all types of money come out then. So same thing, people have an economic drain. The summer's coming to a close, so people will stop kind of going to movies. But again, we've seen a little bit of a break in that because of movies like Guardians of the Galaxy that come out in late July, early August, and really kind of churns some box office dollars, which doesn't happen necessarily all the time. Now, this year, we've already had a pretty rough few months of movies, but fingers crossed, everything is on the, up and up from here. I think this week we're starting to see a break with Fast 7 coming out today. I personally probably will not go see that. I will talk about that in my next segment because I will be talking about Fast 7 and why it won't win an Oscar. So I'll talk about that a little later. But we're starting to look a little more favorable. And come the end of this month, come the end of April into May, we will finally, I think, hit our stride. And it will all start, I think, with the Avengers coming out. So we got to get through April. We have a few movies, in there a little bit to make you a little excited. But once we hit May, everything should be back to normal. This is just a kind of a weird few months, I think, for movies. It's not usually this bad. I don't ever remember it being this bad. So that's what you got. So maybe another term you can throw out there for people and surprise them: dump months. That's something else you could throw in people's faces. Now, I know that segment was short, but as I said, I have 3 things to talk to you about today. So I'm going to get out of here now, this segment, so that I can spend as much time as I need to talking to you about why Fast 7 is not going to win an Oscar, why I don't even think it's going to be a contender come awards season. So you have that to look forward to. I'm sure it'll be controversial. I'm sure I'll get a lot of angry Twitter messages, as I usually do. So you want to look forward to that. I'll be back in just, like before, 2 minutes. And welcome back to Out of My Element on RMU Radio. Today we talk about Auteur Theory, the dump months, why movies suck so much. And in this final 10 minutes of the show, I'm going to be talking to you about some pretty outrageous things Vin Diesel had to say about his new movie Fast 7 that opens in theaters today. Now, I want to start this off with Vin Diesel himself's quote, because it's this quote that I'm going to base everything else I say today off of. So I'm going to read this straight from my computer so I don't get it wrong. Universal is going to have the biggest movie in history with this movie, and then it will probably win Best Picture at the Oscars unless the Oscars don't want to be relevant ever. I'm going to break this up into two parts. This makes me very angry and very fired up. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that a week ago I was up in arms about this comment, but I've calmed down, talked to some people, and I think I have a more well-rounded opinion on this than I did last week. So the first part I want to talk about is Universal is going to have the biggest movie in history with this movie. I'm willing to bet they don't. I really don't see Fast 7 making $3 billion. I do think it will be probably the most successful movie that has come out this year, but I don't think that Fast 7 is going to have anything on other movies that are coming out this year as far as box office goes. You know, you've got the Avengers, which the Avengers, when the first Avengers came out, it was a box office record-setting movie. And that was the first one. So I think the second one, which has had, a few years to develop new, a larger fan base, there are definitely more people in that camp now. I think the Avengers is going to break that record. But then I think all of that will be in a lot of trouble come December when the new Star Wars movies comes out. So with Vin Diesel saying that Fast 7 is going to be the biggest movie in history is wrong. That will not be, and I don't even think it'll be the biggest movie in 2015. Now, that being said, do I think it's going to be a terrible movie? I don't like the Fast and Furious movies. I don't think that they're as good as everyone says they are. I don't like cars enough to just watch car chases and action. And I know people tell me this all the time. Oh, the new movies have way more, plot line to them. And maybe they do. And maybe this one is going to have the most plot line of them all. But it's not going to win. And my next point that I want to talk about here, when he says that it will probably win Best Picture at the Oscars unless the Oscars don't want to be relevant forever. I agree with him in one part. By not nominating popular movies, the Oscars are risking becoming irrelevant. That part Vin Diesel is not wrong about. What he is wrong about is saying that this will win Best Picture. If it won Best Picture, it would be the first time in film history that a seventh movie in a franchise has won. Throughout Oscar history, only 2 movies have ever won Best Pictures that were sequels. That was Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and The Godfather 2. And Fast 7 is not Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, or The Godfather 2. I've not seen it yet, but I can tell you right now that it is not up to the caliber of that movie. And I get it. The emotions are running high right now because Paul Walker had died, and that is a tragedy, and that was a great loss to the franchise. However, just because Paul Walker died does not mean that this movie about car racing that maybe has more of a plot line to it, and I hope it does. I hope it is the best that they've ever made. But even if it is the best they've ever made, it is not Oscar worthy. I can tell you that from the previews. I can tell you that from hearing what people are saying. And people are saying that it's a pretty good movie. And it is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And Rotten Tomatoes is what I use to usually, really calculate what movies I'm going to. I think they have a great poll. And they certified it fresh. So it's probably not a terrible movie. I'm not saying it's a terrible movie. I haven't seen it yet. But also, I'm not going to go see it. because I'm not worried that it'll be nominated for an Oscar. I'm not worried that it's going to break box office history. And over the next few days, we'll get to see whether or not it did break any records. And maybe it does break some April records, but as I talked about in the last segment, April's not the biggest month for movies. If it performed in a May, a June, a July, it would be huge. And this is another thing that I really see. I know Vin Diesel is passionate about this movie, and I know a lot of that's from his friend Paul Walker. And like I said, I completely get that, but I think studio executives over at Universal are smart enough to be looking at this movie and saying, we're going to release this in April because this is our best chance to make the most money out of it. I think if you release it during box office season, it would get lost amongst movies like The Avengers or Jurassic World and some other really big names that will be coming out. I think it would lose some of its gravitas then. And also the fact that it's being released in April means to me that it's too early to really be on the radar for any Oscar picks. Come October, I guarantee nobody will be talking about Fast 7 and how it could potentially win an Oscar. It's just not going to happen. It might be a good movie, might be the best in the franchise, but it's just not going to happen. So I'm sorry to disappoint Vin Diesel. I'm sorry to disappoint all you Fast and Furious fans out there. Hopefully you enjoy your movie. Next week, I'm sure it'll be at the top of my box office recap, but it's not going to win an Oscar. I'm sorry to disappoint. And I know I've talked to a few people who believe that it has potential to win an Oscar. Maybe it'll win for something like special effects. They did digitally do all of Paul Walker's scenes, so that could be true, but Best Picture, not going to happen. So moving on to, I'm in the final stretch of my show, the last 3 minutes. I'm going to talk about, as I always do, the box office recap and then what movies you should be going to see. Box office recap. Taking home the #1 spot at the box office this weekend was the movie Home, which got a 46% approval rating, starring Jim Parsons and Rihanna. It made $52.1 million, which is actually better than I would have guessed. I would not have thought it would make even that much money. Somebody's calling in. Nobody's ever called in, so I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try and answer the phone. Hello. Well, they hung up on me, so I don't know. Maybe that was a missed call. Back to the box office recap. #2, we have Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. That made $33.8 million, which is better than I would have thought. It got pretty bad reviews. It's got a 29% approval rating. Not amazing. And then finally, Insurgent, 31%. Shailene Woodley starred in that. It made $21.5 million. So you can see by these ratings, not great. But as I said, things get better. This week, the 2 movies coming out are Furious 7 at 82%, Fast and Furious movie. I don't know how much money that'll make. I'm going to guess it makes, over $100 million. And then finally, we have It Follows. So It Follows could be, I'm going to say go see It Follows this weekend. That's going to be my pick. Now, unfortunately, I am out of time, so I will see all you guys next week on another episode of Out of My Element on RMU Radio.
How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? Oh, I was doing my radio show.
Since when you started to do it? Today? Because usually no one records.
Well, usually I do until 2, but I did until 2:30 today.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's probably
why I never,
yeah.
I never saw him.
Yeah. That's probably it. Usually I'm done by 2, but I'm longer
okay.
today.
So do you like stream it on? Yeah, I think Ben told me that you stream it, you and somebody stream it on